Good morning, this is Marshall Davis. In the 30th saying in the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus deals with the topic of the Trinity. At least it seems like he's referring to the Trinity. It should be noted right at the beginning that the full-blown doctrine of the Trinity that we know today, that Christians believe today, cannot be found in the New Testament in any of the Gospels, much less the Gospel of Thomas. The word Trinity is not used in the Bible. As far as we know, it was first used by Tertullian, who lived around 200 AD. And from the time of Jesus until the 4th century, it was debated. It was not finalized until the second part of the 4th century. Yet we do find the terms Father, Son, and Holy Spirit used in the New Testament, and sometimes they are grouped together. The most famous example is the Great Commission found at the end of the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus reportedly gave a command to his disciples to baptize people in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Although the consensus of biblical scholars is that this baptismal formula is a later addition to the text. Yet there are other references to the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in the Gospels, and even in the Gospel of Thomas. We don't find it here in saying 30 we're looking at today, but we do see it in saying 44, where Jesus says, "Whoever blasphemes against the Father will be forgiven, and whoever blasphemes against the Son will be forgiven, but whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven, either on earth or in heaven." That's a parallel to a canonical saying of Jesus found in our New Testament. So the three terms in the Trinitarian formula are used very early in Christianity. What those three words refer to and how they're related to each other in the idea of the Trinity is a later development. Yet it can be safely said that the historical Jesus used these three terms. Now let's get to our saying for consideration today. Saying 30 is translated in different ways. Jesus says, where there are three deities, they are divine. Where there are two or one, I am with that one. Another translation says, where there are three gods, they are gods. Where there are two or one, I am with him. Another translation, just like this, capitalizes the word God and gods. Where there are three gods, capital G, they are gods, capital G. Now, it's not clear that Jesus here is referring to the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. He could be talking about polytheism. After all, Jesus lived among the Greeks and the Romans, who were polytheists. He grew up in an area known as the Galilee of the Gentiles, near the Decapolis, which were 10 Greek cities, so Jesus would have been familiar with their deities. The three major Roman gods, often referred to as a Capitoline triad, are Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva. Jupiter was the king of the gods and god of the sky. Juno was the queen of the gods and goddess of marriage and women. Minerva was the goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare. These three deities were the most important, and they were widely worshipped in Roman religion. So these might have been what Jesus was talking about when he was talking about three deities. If Jesus is referring to polytheism in the saying, then what Jesus is saying is truly revolutionary for a Jew to say in that time and place, because Jews were fierce monotheists. For Jesus to say where there are three deities, they are divine, or where there are three gods, they are gods, is radical. He seems to be acknowledging polytheism as a legitimate expression of spirituality. He would be saying that all religions are valid expressions of the one reality that monotheists call God. He would be saying that when people worship any deity, they are knowingly or unknowingly worshiping the one deity. That is radical. That would be considered heresy by Jews as well as by Muslims and Christians today. Yet I think that is part of what Jesus is saying here. I think, though, it is also possible that Jesus is talking about what we would now call the Trinity. We know from saying 44 that Jesus is familiar with these terms, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Now, what he meant by these terms was certainly not what the later church meant by the term. He used these terms. He may have these three terms in mind when he says, where there are three deities, they are divine. Or where there are three gods, they are gods. It is just too much of a coincidence that the Trinity is three and Jesus just happens to be talking about three deities here. Now, if this is the case, if Jesus is talking about Father, Son, and Holy Spirit here, what's he saying about them? First of all, this is not, I'll say again, the fully developed doctrine of the Trinity, which was formulated and argued about by the church for the next 3.5 centuries. The three persons of the Trinity are not thought to be three gods or three deities. That is known as tritheism. If Jesus is talking about Father, Son, and Holy Spirit as three deities, then he was teaching then what the church later came to call heresy. To understand what Jesus is talking about here, we must read the rest of the saying. Jesus says, where there are three deities, they are divine. Where there are two or one, I am with that one. So he's moving beyond any talk of three deities, and he's pointing to the one, to oneness. In this way, Jesus is transcending theological disputes. It's the same approach that we just saw in the last episode when we were looking at saying 29, and that saying Jesus was not getting into the whole metaphysical discussion about body and spirit. Jesus did not care about philosophical or theological distinctions. They are a waste of time, in his opinion. What he cares about is the one. Jesus was focusing on oneness and not duality. Where there are two or one, I am with that one, Jesus said. Now, in saying that, Jesus might have been thinking about duality in general, or he may have been thinking about the Father and the Son. Jesus often talks about the Father and the Son and relationship between the two in the Gospel of John. The church also argued about this for centuries as they developed the doctrine of the Incarnation. But here Jesus is not getting into a discussion of this, of divine figures, three or two. He chooses the one. Where there are two or one, I am with the one, Jesus says. Jesus focused on the one with a capital O. He opts for non-duality over duality. Jesus was a teacher of non-duality. As I've said before, having said that, I also think that there is value in pondering the later developed Christian doctrine of the Trinity. I devoted a whole episode to this topic entitled Trinity and Non-duality. You can do a search for that, and I'll put a link for that in the description of this episode. In short, I see the Trinity, as we have it today, as functioning very much like a Zen koan. It points us beyond reason. Trinity says that 3 is 1, that 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 1. Now that is not mathematically true, but it is spiritually true. When we delve deeply into the Trinity, it points us beyond multiplicity to the divine reality of non-duality. 3 is 1. 2 is 1. The 10,000 things are 1. All is 1. And Jesus says, I am with the One. And that is it for today. Grace and peace to you.